Hello and welcome to this video all about children retaining their GPC knowledge and what we do if we have children within our cohorts who are struggling to retain and recall the graphemes that represent each phoneme that they know. Now, first of all, I'd like to point out that there is no magical quick fix for this, but it's all about best practice. So today what I'm going to do is share with you what I believe is best practice, and then hopefully it'll give you the opportunity to reflect on what you're currently offering the children and maybe potentially tweak and change little bits and pieces of what you're currently doing. As ever, if you find it useful, please share it with like-minded colleagues and teachers and friends and professionals. Hopefully you'll find it useful, and I'll get started now. So I get lots of messages very regularly asking me, what can we do if children struggle to retain the GPCs? So I'm going to address that now. And as I say, hopefully it will be of some use to you, even if it just means tweaking and changing a few little bits. So first of all, we always have to begin with identifying the potential problem. So it could be something as simple as sight or hearing, speech and language, teaching strategies, or memory. So let's have a look at each of those potential problems and see what we can do about each of them. So in terms of sight, are they struggling to see? Many children in their reception and year one cohorts have never had their eyes tested. So I will always ask the parents to go and get an eye test and see whether this is having an impact. And there are more and more children wearing glasses, I find these days. So I think it's always a good place to start. Go and get their eyes tested and see, rule that out and see whether just actually being able to see the graphemes on the piece of paper or on the board is causing the children an issue. Hearing. The children obviously have hearing tests when they're born, but I think hearing is just like sight. Children need to go and check to see if there's a medical issue or a medical reason as to why they're struggling to identify and tune into those phonemes. So if they're struggling to hear, maybe it's a background noise issue within the classroom. Get the children's hearing checked and then see whether the children respond better when they're in a quieter environment. So if this means taking a child out of the setting into somewhere a little bit quieter with a group of children, seeing if this improves and makes a difference for the children. Is it that the children are struggling to tune in to the smallest units of sounds within a word, and therefore the grapheme and phoneme correspondences are not linking and they don't mean anything to the children because they're unable to tune in to those smallest units of sound? If that's the issue, then it would usually be that they've not had enough phase one experiences. So that's something you will need to look at there. And as I said, can they hear you? Can they hear what you are saying? It might not be that the classroom is noisy when you're having your phonics session, but they just simply may not be able to hear you, whether ear infections or glue ear, whatever it might be. This is something we need to consider and rule out as a potential barrier to learning. Speech and language is absolutely huge, and there's been lots of talk about it in the news recently, and whilst the media seem to be blaming COVID and lockdown, we professionals know that speech and language has been an issue for a very long time, and it's not something new in the last couple of years. In fact, year on year, for my career of teaching to date, I found that this has got worse and worse and worse as I progressed through my career. So I think technology has something to blame, but also just people's busy lives, how fast everything is, and the fact that we don't place enough emphasis on talking to the children when we're at home. Potentially parents aren't placing enough emphasis on just talking, listening and communicating. So do the children who are struggling to retain GPCs, do they have a speech and language and communication difficulty? Is that difficulty based on the fact that they literally just are not developed in their speech yet? Is it that they have a pronunciation and articulation issue? Or is it that they have a very limited vocabulary? Another thing I find year on year is that children see pictures of things and they don't have a correct name for it. So for example, a child might look at a musical instrument and just call it a music. They're unable to identify that it's a piano or a guitar or a drum. So this limited vocabulary is having a huge impact on children's speech and language too. So we need to identify whether it's not that they can't hear it or they can't see it, but it's their speech and language having an impact on their ability to retain all of the information that you are delivering within your phonics session. So if it is a pronunciation issue, you need to identify the phonemes that they are finding difficult to articulate, and then think about, do they correlate with the GPCs that the children are finding hard to retain or learn? So for example, if they mispronounce the word this or the and say the or this or a list, all those are really common. So then they're not going to find it very easy to retain the digraph or the or because they're getting them all muddled up. So you need to have a think about the way they talk and how this is impacting on their phonic teaching, phonic learning. Work on their articulation via stories, physical activities, and through play. And the key with children who are having difficulty with their pronunciation and articulation is that they don't feel pressured and they don't feel stressed, because if they do, they'll stop talking. And the last thing we want is for those children to go quiet. They need constant rehearsal. We want them to be chatterboxes so that they can rehearse their pronunciation and articulation skills. If they're reluctant to have a go and stop talking, they're never going to be able to develop those oral muscles that they need to be able to have clear speech. So keep it playful. In terms of teaching strategies, you've got to think about what you currently offer and how you deliver it. So I'm just going to briefly touch on those things just as a way for you to reflect on what you're offering and how you're delivering it to the children. So first of all, in terms of what we offer, we all know that children need that VAC style of teaching where they can see it, hear it, and move and touch and feel. So in terms of the visual aspect for children to be able to see it, what resources do you have on offer for the children to remember the graphemes and the phonemes that those graphemes make? Do you have charts with pictures and images? Do you have flashcards with pictures and images? Do you have things around your setting so that they are constantly seeing and being able to refer to those things? And are the images something that the children will recognise? Auditory aspects are obviously making sure that we model really clear pronunciation of the phonemes. And this is why children need to be able to tune in, hear, and make sure that they really understand what you are saying. So when you are making the phoneme are they able to hear its and not mistaking it for so that's really important, that we make sure that that auditory experience of the phonemes is clear, precise, and the children are understanding it. Rhymes and things to learn, tricky words and letter formations are crucial in terms of that auditory experience of learning. And are you using actions that are consistent year on year? So can you make sure that the children in reception are experiencing the same actions as they will experience in year one? So any that they haven't picked up and retained, they are being exposed to them again the following year, and by every adult that they might work with exactly the same action. And the consistency in action is key for those children in particular. Obviously for all of them, but those children really do need consistency. Is the delivery of your phonics session consistent every single day? The children need to have that cycle. They need to know what's coming next, so that you're spending less time explaining what the activity is, and they just have the whole session focused on learning, rehearsal, and application. So although you might think, I need to make this more exciting for those children because it's not sticking, actually it's almost the opposite that's true. They need lots and lots of rehearsal. They need to understand where they're at, what's coming next, what happens every day, so that they are constantly having that repetition and rehearsal. And that's not going to be boring for the children if you have a fast pace and deliver it with rigor and passion. So if your session has that revise, recap and rehearse element to it. You need to make sure that this is focused on phonics and phonics only. So not making it super exciting by putting graphemes in the sand so that the children can rehearse them, because children who don't recognise those graphemes easily may be easily distracted and decide they really actually just want to dig in the sand and build a tower or a sandcastle. So you've got to make sure that it's incredibly focused. They need to learn and they need to apply it to reading and writing. If the children feel that like they are just learning the graphemes and the phoneme correspondences just for the sake of looking at it and knowing what it is, they may not be as engaged. Whereas if they know it has a purpose, and the reason we use this is so we can enjoy those amazing stories that Miss reads to us every day, or it's so that they can write a card to mummy and it's got a real sense of purpose to it, they will be more likely to be engaged. Teaching those common exception words explicitly is crucial for the children, and giving them a challenge, but giving them a challenge so that they feel like they've succeeded and achieved something. So this is the opportunity where they feel that they've really got it today, and so that a challenge needs to be developmentally appropriate for each child. In terms of your delivery, as I've said, just to reiterate, there needs to be no distraction. So if, like this gentleman in the photo, he's driving, there needs to be no distraction for that, so he can drive in a safe way. Just like in our phonics sessions, if you're focused on learning your phonic GPC knowledge and applying that to reading and writing, you don't need the distractions of enhancements that will make the children deviate from what it is they're learning. So let's focus on the job in hand. The fun, playful stuff can come later on, but your phonics session needs to be incredibly structured and focused on retaining the skills, rehearsing the skills, revising the skills and learning new skills so that they can apply it to the playful stuff that will happen later on. Apply the learning playfully and meaningfully for the children in their play. So this is where you can think about what the children are really interested in, and then go in and play with those children, interact with those children whilst they're engaged and playing with something that they enjoy. And then you can think about bringing in little aspects of phonics into their play as and when appropriate, because as you can see in this picture, all children will learn in different ways, and this is how we think about the rehearsal within their play according to their interests. So memory was another aspect that I said might be a potential barrier to why they aren't retaining these GPCs. And what we need to make sure is that the children transfer the GPCs from their working memory into their long-term memory. And that takes time, because a child of 4 and 5 have only really just started developing their working memory, so it's limited. The aim is to develop a schema of reading and writing so that they do it without even thinking. Now, we've all driven somewhere before, because driving is now a schema to us without even thinking about doing it. And now that we are confident and expert readers and writers, we also do that without thinking quite a lot, because it's become a schema. So what is a schema? And in early years, we think about schemas a lot as the children are playing. So it's those fascinations and those interests they have, and they might be things like vertical, where children have this almost fixation and climbing up and going down, going up and going down. Enveloping, those children who are constantly making presents for people and wrapping things up in layers and layers of paper or layers and layers of fabric. That's an enveloping schema. Trajectory, those children who are obsessed with throwing things. Circular, where they constantly go around in circle, connecting things, lining things up. You've seen the schemas that children demonstrate, and sometimes parents and practitioners find these schemas particularly irritating if someone's got a schema where they're constantly putting objects in a bag and transferring it over to another area. But these schemas are all learning opportunities. They're our brain developing understanding of things that will help us throughout all of our lives. So they're normal, they're part of our development, our brain developing understanding of all of these concepts. So we want reading and writing to become a schema too, which is transferring all of their knowledge from their working memory to their long-term memory. And the way we can do this is letting children have a structure that's not too distracting. Keep explanation within your phonics session to a minimum and let the working memory focus on the GPCs only and how we apply them. So if they are distracted by other elements brought into their session, their working memory is thinking about too many things, and we want their working memory to be focused on the GPCs and applying it to reading and writing. So we all know those children who all they ever really want to do is line things up in a line, and they don't want to be distracted from that, and all they want to do is line things up. And that's because that's their schema. They're developing the understanding of how things can be ordered or structured in a line. And so when we're teaching phonics, if we want reading and writing to become a schema, we need to not get distracted by anything else and only focus on that. I'm going to stop my share now. And whilst I said at the beginning of the video that there is no magic quick fix to this, hopefully the video will have explained to you little bits and pieces so that you know that it's that structure, that constant rehearsal of recognition and application that's key in getting the children to really retain their GPC knowledge and, more importantly, apply that to their reading and writing.